Test 1, 2. Test, test. All right. Welcome, everybody. We'll talk about SANs today. This is the SAN Smorgasbord, one of the more entertaining titles I think you'll see of one of these talks. Understanding Fibre Channel, multi-Gigabit Ethernet, and iSCSI. So we'll go ahead and get right into it. First, let's talk about who I am. It's probably pretty important that you realize that I'm not an IT guy. I can't write a book on this stuff, but I can look at it from the point of view of a guy who's worked in facilities, worked in post-production for a long time. I started out with a film production degree, so nowhere near computer science. Had to learn it as I started to get more interested in the business. I was at Avid as designer for the post-work groups for several years, and that included Unity 2.0 days. I'm dating myself now, but back in about 2099 or so. And to the entire post-work group, including Media Manager and Transfer Manager and all of that, if you're familiar with those products. In Postworks New York, I was chief engineer. We had multiple Unity setups at the time, and that was in the days when you had a wall full of drives that was about 2 terabytes in size. I can get on a thumb drive these days. So that was my life in the private sector, and we started out at Facilis Technology in 2004, and I'm vice president there, one of the original founders, and we do shared storage. So that's, and of course the pinnacle of my career is speaking at the BVE today. And thank you very much for coming to see the pinnacle of my career. So let's start out with some education. We're going to go over shared storage just as a little bit of a 101, because unless you know why you need shared storage, you may not need to know all the rest of the bits and pieces around shared storage. So let's talk about, first of all, centralization. I break this down into 3 categories of shared storage: centralization, migration, and collaboration. The centralization part is pretty important. It's where most people think of when they think of centralized storage or storage that is available to multiple clients simultaneously. And it's basically the ability to store all the data in one place. Now, you do that because you can easily distribute the storage between the edit rooms. Now, with a system that allows you to do this, allows you to have LUNs that are available to multiple clients simultaneously, you're able to scale them as you need to. You're able to allocate those from a single location, and the administration becomes very easy for all of the storage needs of all the multiple rooms that you have. Now, that's pretty basic. So next is moving into migration, and this is migration of jobs from room to room. So I start out with a project or a job in a single room, and if I have that kind of vanilla room set up in my facility, I can then move that job from room to room. If I have project compatibility and media file compatibility, it's very easy to do with a centralized and shared storage system. So this allows me to schedule any suite to work on any project. Now that is unto itself pretty good, because the scheduling hassles of someone coming back in after a 2-week sabbatical, the project has to be extended and goes into the schedule of the next project. Less of a concern when you have a shared or central storage system that you can then move those rooms around, move those customers, those clients around between rooms. You can eliminate duplication of data. Staying up late at night, duplicating data, preparing for the session the next day kind of goes away when you have this ability to migrate jobs between rooms. And no more sneaker net, which is the running drives down the hallway, dropping drives along the way of drive movement. And of course, you know, with today's arrays, that's pretty difficult because they weigh about 100 pounds each. Eliminate after-hours room maintenance. Room goes down. You can move the project to another room. So you can do your room maintenance during the day, upgrades, anything you need to do for hardware or software, troubleshooting. You get a virus, you can deal with it tomorrow. Just move the job over today. So that's the migration aspect of shared storage. Collaboration is the holy grail. It's what we all want to be able to do. It's what we want to do when we have a project that requires more than one edit suite to work on the same project at the same time, is collaborate. And in collaboration, of course, you're working with multiple editors on the same project. You can replace editor with graphic artist, content creator, rich media provider, whatever you want to call these people, operators, editors, artists, all working on the same project. Now, what that does is that enhances the creativity, multiple eyes on the same project and the same footage, working on different effects, and enhances the speed. And the speed of the project goes up, you can hit deadlines a lot quicker. And you displace the tedious jobs like capture and output. capture, output, render, encoding, all the things you're doing to post to web. You take that out of the room where the project was completed, put it someplace else, because you have that collaborative aspect where everyone has access to those same media files, and in some cases even the same project files or the same timelines. So if I have a system that is software only with no I/O outside of my file I/O, which is, I don't have a Blackmagic card or an AJA or a Bluefish card on this thing. I don't have my Nitrous DX box for my I/O. It's a file-based system. That's okay, because the files have already been ingested for me. Everything's been brought in. All I need to do is open the project up, see those files, be able to work with those. So I can add more of those file I/O systems and reduce my hardware cost, even to the point of reducing cost of hardware on the router. I'm not have a router point for every room. So the bottom line to all of that is really reducing the non-billable hours when it comes to time that you're spending outside of the editorial room, time that you're spending outside of the client sitting next to you in doing things that are not optimal for the cost of the room. You're increasing billable hours for tight deadlines. Instead of someone coming to you and saying, hey, I need this by Friday, and you say, oh, that puts us out a week, you can say, no, you need it by Friday, we'll do overtime, double overtime, this is how much you owe me. So you're increasing those billable hours and you're getting more revenue in and still having the next week to go on to your next job, because you can put more people against that job at the same time. You can meet schedules. Sick days and downtime in certain rooms don't really affect you because you'll be able to put somebody else on the job very easily. All that media is there, the project is there for everyone to work on. And you reduce, once again, those per seat hardware costs. If you're a file I/O system, you're not dealing with the extra Blackmagic, AJA, DeckLink cards that you would normally have if you need to get in and out from tape devices. And you can bid on those big jobs. Instead of them coming to you and saying, hey, I need this much done by Friday, this much done by next Friday, or in 2 months I need this whole film done, and you saying, sorry, I just don't have the infrastructure to do that, or having to go and hire more people, rent out more rooms, go to overflow. Since you have the infrastructure in place, you can bid on the big jobs. And anyone who's ever get into a shared storage environment, a real shared storage environment where it's active storage, not the company active storage, but active storage for you, sitting up on the network on Fibre Channel or a fast Ethernet link that everyone can talk to and read from and write to at the same time. Anyone who's gone that direction knows they can't ever go back because the jobs they have in-house right now require it. And that's where you want to be as a facility. So, in the end, pounds, not dollars. In the end, pays for itself in the pounds that you can get as revenue from the shared storage. So, now on to sort of the technical aspects of shared storage, what it is, connectivity methods, the types of different shared storage that are out there. So the first thing I always bring up when someone asks me, what should I get? Well, who am I talking to? If I'm talking to IT people, they always want to know the specs on the switch. They want to know everything about the connectivity aspect. They want to know what kind of drives I use, what kind of chips are on the drives that I use. And all this is in the interest of making it their own IP, of course. IT people are very technical, and they want to find out how to build it themselves, which is where it comes right down to. So I try to give them all the information I can, and I may actually steer them in a different direction because I know that the IT department is capable of supporting a more complex system. When it comes to the facility engineer, the chief engineer type, maybe a signal guy, show it to me. Let me talk to somebody else who has the same thing, and I can do that as well. So that's more of a pragmatic look at this, and it's sort of like if they're doing it and they have the same type of facility that we do, it'll probably work for us. Now, when it comes to the operations people, they're talking about how much time will this save, how much money can I save by putting this in, and what's the risk? What's the risk that I'm not going to meet a deadline because this thing is now in charge of my entire facility. I'm on a hub. If that hub fails, every room is down. That's true. If you lean on central storage and you lean on shared storage for your livelihood, you have to make sure it's reliable because your whole facility is down if that shared storage falters. If you're a creative person, they always want to know, do I have to learn something? Man, do I really have to get taught about this, or does it just work when I boot up my computer? We try and work around that as well. Everything can't be hidden to the end user, but a lot can, to the point where it's very simple to operate and use on a daily basis. So the owner wants to know how reliable, when the expletive hits the fan, who do I call? I want some accountability. I want someone to tell me that this thing is going to be reliable, and I can work with that. So the how, first off, if you're coming from a direct attached storage environment where every system has its own hard drives, and you have a stack of them next to your desk, all of these still apply. If you have your own facility right now that has a network-based storage, if you have your own SAN system, all of this still applies. If you want to upgrade, if you want to change your SAN solution or your network, the first option is a total forklift replacement. You take everything out, you put the new solution in. That requires a short-term tech staff that is very strong. Now that might be from a reseller, that might be from a distributor, that might be from the manufacturer themselves, that can come in and make sure your facility for the first week is in good shape, babysit basically. Now, if you have a tech staff that's very strong unto itself, you can always rely on them in that first week, at that critical time, to be sure that you're going to be able to flip a switch, as it were, and go to a new solution entirely without dropping the ball on all the projects. And you need some short-term scheduling latitude. You got to expect that there's going to be some growing pains. Some operators aren't going to realize what they should be doing. Some people are going to get confused about where projects live and where media lives. So certainly you need that latitude in your facility in order to perform a total forklift replacement, is what we call it. You can do an install with a changeover timetable. And the timetable of the changeover, basically it means that you're going incrementally. Maybe one system here, one system there is moving off of their current infrastructure and onto the new SAN. That works in a lot of places because they have project-based rooms. If you do a 4-wall or a project-based room, you can move that one after that project is done, move it over to the new SAN, and the remainder can stay on their current infrastructure, and slowly you have everyone moved over. That requires a nice long-term fixed schedule. If you're the type of facility that takes the job next week as soon as it comes up, you bid on it and get it, very tough to do a long-term changeover because you never really have a fixed schedule. So we see that happening a lot. And then you can do a hybrid. You can have multiple installed networks simultaneously. And right now, if you have an expensive SAN solution from the likes of, StorNext or Avid ISIS, you could move into another solution for needs of a single department, but still have that department hooked into the other SAN. It's possible to do. Not everything conflicts. Some things will, but not everything does. This requires a strong long-term tech staff because you've just doubled the complexity of the entire network. So you have to make sure you have the appropriate tech staff to deal with that. So now into the nuts and bolts of this, the options for shared storage. Which ones? So let's go into connectivity of shared storage. And this is where, even, I can't say even I get confused, and this isn't my education, but I get confused about some of these things to the point where I have to go to the ADO stand and say, what's Fibre Channel over Ethernet again? How's that? Because it all is very confusing. If you don't deal with it every day, it can become very confusing. First up, Fibre Channel. Fibre Channel, as it exists in technical terms, is a link system. Basically, it allows computers to link together via a protocol called Fibre Channel. And it sets the speed. You're either 1 gig, 2 gig, all the way up to 8 or 16 gig today. And that is the gigabits per second you can expect to travel through that link on Fibre Channel. Now, it has nothing to do with the data you're putting through it. That'll come later. Ethernet, once again, is also a physical link system. You plug it in one side, in the other side. It talks to each other. You've linked up. Now, that's before you ever put an IP address in or before you ever do anything with data. It's a physical link system, and it sets the speed. It's either 10, 100 megabit or 1 gig or 10 gig Ethernet. Now, TCP/IP is the protocol, and it's also a transmission language. It's how you set up connectivity between multiple systems on an Ethernet network, in this case. So if I have an IP address, my server has an IP address, I'm using TCP/IP to link up those two systems, and they can now talk to each other. SCSI. SCSI's been around forever, both as a hardware protocol transmission and also as here as a transmission language. So SCSI is a large block transmission language. It talks over multiple types of links but it talks very quickly and in large blocks, and not a packet-based transmission like TCP/IP. And this will all come together in a minute once I get to the sort of the standard terms that are used. Optical, I can't find a good name for it. It's optical cable. It's basically light cable. It's light pipe. It's a light transmission of data using lasers, mostly seen in 10 gig Ethernet and Fibre Channel. And then Cat5, Cat6 is your common Ethernet networking cable. It's a twisted pair. It basically is the physical connectivity that is most often used with Ethernet. Now, so common terms, if you hear someone say start with iSCSI, you hear someone say iSCSI, they're talking about a SCSI language of data transmission over using TCP/IP as a connection protocol. So you have an IP address, I have an IP address, and Ethernet as the physical link, right? So why would you do that? Because SCSI is large block. TCP/IP allows that connection to happen with normal drivers on normal systems and operating systems, and Ethernet gives me a nice cheap way to connect over twisted pair copper. I can also do this over optical, since Ethernet 10 gig or even 1 gig can travel over optical cable, and can be either 1 or 10 gig. So that's iSCSI. I'll talk about where iSCSI gets implemented in the different SAN solutions in a minute. Fibre Channel over Ethernet, it's still pretty uncommon. It's a neat little protocol that allows you to do Fibre Channel with SCSI large block protocol over Ethernet. The only thing it really gives you is the ability to run a SCSI protocol over IP without a client initiator. Because if you have iSCSI, you need a piece of software in the client that lets you mount an iSCSI volume. Without that, you're not doing iSCSI. So if you have Fibre Channel over Ethernet, you can do the same thing, get SCSI protocol over IP without having that piece of software. You don't see too much of it. It's mostly an enterprise or sort of an IT-centric backbone relay. Fibre Channel. Someone says Fibre Channel, most likely they're talking about SCSI language over optical Fibre Channel. I say optical Fibre Channel because ever since 4 gig came out, really copper Fibre Channel isn't really much around anymore. There was copper Fibre Channel. If you remember the old Xserve RAIDs, they had the integrated SFP on the copper line. You hooked into the Xserve RAID and into the Xserve. That's your copper Fibre Channel. Mostly we're dealing with optical right now, and it's SCSI language over optical Fibre Channel. And then if someone says, I'm connecting over Ethernet, they mean it's TCP/IP over copper or over optical for the more expensive or the longer runs. And there you go. So now, which types of shared storage deploy or utilize these different types of connectivity? So a NAS, network attached storage, is the acronym. And lots of TLAs in this section. It's a standards-based network file system. Basically, it's using TCP/IP, and it has a file system that is network appropriate, like CIFS, SMB, NFS, AFP, for different types of operating systems. All pretty much the same. They're all multi-user write compatible, which means that I can write to that file system from multiple places because the server is actually doing the writing for me and not the client. So I call it NAS plus, and this is NAS plus a GUI. So normally, if I have a network attached storage, I got to go to the server every time I want to make a change, make a different allocation for a different user, or change permissions on a certain drive for a certain user or network drive. NAS Plus gives me a GUI. Basically, on the client side, I can open it up and say, all right, I want to mount this network drive, or I want to change the permission for that network drive for that person, and I can do it from a remote location. Then this is the edit share, the space, the JMR. They use these different applications to allow for GUI-based control of network shares. I call it SDAS. It's a shared direct attached storage. It's not really a SAN. And this is with a dedicated pipe, might be Fibre Channel, it might be iSCSI, but it's not a shared file system. It's various native file systems. This is the old FibreJet command soft. This is SANMP, SNS. This is basically having a drive in the middle of a large work group with dedicated high-speed pipe, and the clients take care of deciding who has read and write access to each drive. And so it's shared direct attached storage. So SAN is basically a dedicated pipe and it has client-side file system translation. That means that it's not native file system by the time it gets to the client. Something has changed about it. Something has made it shared. Because native file systems, a file system is NTFS, Mac OS Extended, HFS Plus. Those are file systems. They're native to the different operating systems that live on the computers. So that native file system is not a multi-write file system by nature. It has to be changed into a multi-write file system. So a SAN does that, or it creates another custom file system that lives above anything else that would be in the operating system natively, and it translates that on the client side. So this is the StoreNext HyperFS. Facilis has a shared file system. All of these, and Avid Unity, Avid ISCSI would be on the same category as this. It's a SAN because there's a translation at the client side. I call it SAN Plus if it's more than just a file system. For our industry, we have a lot of applications that could be enhanced by different feature sets. Maybe it's a project sharing, maybe it's a media sharing that's really based on an application itself and not just a standard file system. For example, you can't run Avid systems for the most part on an XSAN or a StoreNext because there's no application-centric features on a StoreNext file system for Avid. Avid, of course, has it for their own stuff, as you would expect. Facilis has it for Avid as well, and several other companies are doing this sort of application-specific, project sharing or some sort of a metadata glue for different applications. That's what I call a SAN Plus. So, to close it up, and I'll take some questions in a minute, when should you worry about shared storage? When do you get to that point where you can justify the cost and you can justify it to your boss or to your banker of getting shared storage? You know it's time to get rid of your direct attached storage when the lobby's full of downtime refugees. When you see people walking around because a drive's gone down in one room and they can't go anyplace else because it's direct attached workflow, you know you're probably not making any money that day. And you should really think about some way to accommodate these people if this happens again. Shared storage would do that. Assistant techs are starting to smell. Well, when you have to copy data over from room to room overnight, because to prepare for the session the next day that requires that data to live someplace else, you might not get to take a shower. So the techs are really starting to get a little smelly. The guy in his basement with a G-Ray is stealing your clients because really he has the same level of functionality that you do. A guy in his basement with a hard drive and a Mac running Final Cut. I'm sure he's a very good editor. He's stealing your business. So bulk up your infrastructure. Make yourself more appealing to the larger customers that you have. On the serious note, P2, XDCAM, etc. If I'm doing a file-based workflow, a file-based acquisition, and I copy all that to my local hard drive, and I give the S/S card back to the guy in the truck, and then I go to copy it up to the network, and I go out and get a coffee, come back, and the thing's crashed. Well, wouldn't you like to copy it once to the central storage, and it automatically goes off the tape? Wouldn't you want to have some structure there to be sure you're not running after the truck? Don't wipe out the S/S. Bring it back. So file-based camera acquisition has really turned the industry on its ear as far as central storage requirements, network storage requirements is concerned, because you want to have it in multiple places. You also want to have an easy way to upload it and make it available to everyone at the same time. So if you already have a NAS or a SAN, you know it's time to upgrade when you call a tech support and they say something about it being obsolete. I always tell my guys, never say the word obsolete. If they're using their SAN and their storage and it's still making money for them, it can't be obsolete, unless it's keeping the clients down to a level where they can't perform at the same as they would if you had a different solution. So you definitely don't want to be obsolete in that area. Editors start to bring in their own direct attached storage. Now, that may happen, and they may say, well, listen, every time I come to you and say I need more space, you yell at me, I'm not deleting enough stuff, so I'm bringing my own drive in. Might be time to find something more scalable or more cost-effective for you to scale up when your projects scale up. You move jobs off to the email server because the editor says, listen, email server is always up, this SAN's always down. So I'm going to move all my video up to the email server, and so I'll always have access to it. You don't want to get to that point. Find something more reliable. On a serious note, Red, the Alexa, you're finding that your local attached storage or internal storage isn't performing to the level that you'd like. Instead of buying that big RAID next to your desk that's going to make a lot of noise, look at a central storage solution. Look at some network storage that you can put away in a room somewhere, let it whine, let it make noise, little cable comes into your room and you connect the whole thing. So those are definitely reasons to do it, because they're high bandwidth video formats potentially, and it may overload local storage that you have. And Final Cut Pro X. It's the one thing that I've heard recently is, you know, the FCPX thing, it may force me into a different storage solution. And if you already have a NAS or a SAN, chances are, unless you've thought of this beforehand and you used Avid at the time, probably doesn't support Avid, because Avid has a special way of working with their media streams manager, which is the databasing function within the Avid itself. So if you're coming from Final Cut Pro 7, don't see a good way out of Final Cut Pro 7 without moving to a different manufacturer. It's likely that your SAN also doesn't support that different manufacturer. A good reason to upgrade the SAN or to replace it. So that's all I have for that. I hope I'm not over time. I hope that gave you enough to think about. And I'm asking if anyone has any questions. I was that good or that bad? Okay. Oh, sure. Thank you. You're very nice. Yeah. If you have a SAN you start with and have another one to take over, you mean? It is actually. I mean, there certainly is a lot of SAN manufacturers who are obsoleting their own solutions, you know, as an end of life or as just out of support. If you have a complex SAN solution like a Unity 4, Unity 5 from Avid, and they simply have stopped developing it, and you know that you go to line, you go to the next generation of software, you're not going to be able to rely on that SAN. So incremental changeover from that to a SAN who's still in development, you know, is something that's commonly done. And what I hear the most from a lot of the people that talk to me is Avid has gone in the direction of, you know, from Fibre Channel, high bandwidth, you know, sort of the boutique post facility, they've gone into more of a broadcast aim for the iSCSI product, which is Ethernet only. Certainly, if you're working in very low bandwidth, offline only, that's not a problem. But if you want to do the same work you used to do on a Fibre Channel system, it's going to be difficult with the iSCSI. So a lot of folks are finding different solutions and moving over. XSAN is another one. I mean, not because XSAN 2 doesn't work necessarily, but because of one of the reasons I mentioned before, that XSAN 2 won't support Avid. So if you want to have some collaboration with multiple Avid systems, there's really no choice but to either move off of that or supplement that with a different storage solution. Just don't buy local storage. You know, that's just it's a road to nowhere. And XSAN, of course, you know, is from a company that has really decided that they don't want to support the Pro environment, and they've now included it for free in the operating system. So anything that's free, you can count on it not being around for too long, as far as Apple's concerned. And there are several others as well, mostly around network-attached storage that was put in place for ease of use, bit bucket approach. I want to put everything I have in this one bit bucket, this one large volume, all my graphics, all my Photoshop work, all my After Effects, and my video too. And oops, the video doesn't quite play back well enough, so I'll just download it every time I need to work on it, and then I'll upload it again. It's not a very nice workflow, and it really doesn't cater to collaboration, and it really causes a lot of human error over time as files are left out, as you know, systems crash, and you know, files are written corrupt, and so you really want to have everything that's online and available to the clients in one location on one set of drives and under one manufacturer. We're at stand F30. If you want to come over and take a look, I'm with Polar Graphics, who's our distributor for the UK, and you know, come take a look. If you have any more questions, you can find me there. But thanks a lot for your time. Appreciate it.